Old High German pronunciation, consonants. The following is from an Old High German primer by Joseph Wright and an introduction to the study of Old High German by Lionel Armitage. Links to these textbooks are in the description below. Now, before we begin, not all scholars agree on the same pronunciation for Old High German. Some scholars interpret the language a little differently when it comes to vowel quality or what have you, or focusing on a particular dialect, time, and place, and multitude of things. We also have to remind ourselves that Old High German is not a monolith. It's not just one variety of speech. When properly understood, Old High German is a group of dialects. So here we have the consonants. For those of you who are listening to this video as opposed to watching it directly, I'll just read out the consonants. We have B, C, CH, D, F, G, H, asterisk J. The reason why that's there because J does not appear in Old High German manuscripts, but rather we have I, E, G to represent J. We have K, L, M, N, P, Q, R, S, T, TH. Afterwards, we have U and its variation V. That may sound a little strange, but the thing is, when it comes to consonants and how to represent them, we have to bear in mind that like sometimes the representation of a consonant either could be graphical or could be phonetic. And to distinguish that's a difficulty in of itself. Even, I believe, Lionel Armitage in his writings say that it's really hard to ascertain that distinction. I think Joseph Wright would say something similar. So U and V, depending on the etymology of the word in question, will determine what sound they make. Next, we have asterisk W. Yes, because W as we know it because W as we know it does not appear in any Old High German manuscript. Rather, we have these combinations, as you can see on the screen. For those of you who are watching, great, but for those who are listening, please take a look. We have two U's, one U, a UV, a VU, a VV, so we have these combinations of the V and the U, which would make the W, hence why we call it a W in the modern character, if that makes sense. But let's move on to the next letter. So, and then we have X and Z. Thankfully, B, D, K, L, M, N, P, T are as in English. So we won't cover them in this video, and I won't go over potential archaicisms, what have you, because I want to make this video accessible to everyone. I don't want to have this video longer than it needs to be. So the letters I've mentioned, as in English, very easy. Let's get to it. So C has two pronunciations. Let's get right to it. C, as in English K, so K, and this occurs at the end of words, finally, before back vowels, and back vowels are A, O, U, and before consonants. So we have our examples here. Tack, day, korn, corn, kund, known, kleine, pretty. C makes another sound, as in German Z. So it makes a TS sound, that TS sound. And this happens before front vowels. And front vowels, in this case, are I and E. However, the C does not make the sound in the combination of SC. So we have our examples here of Lützel, little, tse, two. C in the combination of SC, as in English school, sk, skedan, to sever. In addition to the other consonants, it's worth mentioning KH, as this would be found in Upper German dialects of Old High German, and by Upper German we're talking about Alemannic and Bavarian. So this combination of KH is a k and h sound, and that h sound is the same h as you would have in German Buch or Scottish Loch. So it's a k, as we have korn, corn. Moving to CH and its variation of HH, the sound it makes as in German or in Scottish English, loch, so it's the same h sound as you would have in German Buch. So we have sprechen, to speak. We do have double H there, and the thing is, you can pronounce this as you would with the CH, but there's also a notion of with double consonants, which I will repeat later in the video, that the double consonants, you would pronounce them as you would in Italian or Swedish, so this could easily be pronounced as sprechen. So it could be pronounced like that, or sprechen, to speak. Now G. G in Old High German has 3 pronunciations. Let's get right to it. So G, our first pronunciation, as in English, Gott or garden. So a simple G sound, and this occurs in the start of words initially, in the middle of words medially, and finally at the end of words. So we have Gott, good, liggen, to lie down, and Tag, day. Our second pronunciation with G is something called a voiced velar fricative. And it makes a sound like something like this, like a sound, like a sound. So here we have sagen, sagen, to tell. So we learned from Armitage that this happens sometimes. I mean, it really depends on the etymology of the word in question, but it's not a stretch to imagine that people would use this pronunciation. But he says sometimes, and when it's not that sound, it would be the former sound of G. So if you see a G in this intervocalic position and you say G, that's just as fine. So our next sound with G, Joseph Wright describes it nearly as English yet, so a Y sound. And let's carry on with our examples here. Jener, Jan, herje, dative singular of army. I also want to add that, well, how does one know which G is what G? If it's a G, a G, or a Y. It really depends on the roots of the word in question. You find out the etymology to find out, or at least have a good idea of the pronunciation. However, it's not a stretch to mix these up, because that's how the dialects form. That because you have something called in linguistics called analogy, where one part within a language would influence another part, would take over. Like, for example, English had several plural endings, but now we just have 2. Well, similarly, some pronunciations may overtake others. Some people may say g more, or others may say y more, or some may say g more. So that's realistic to how some German dialects are today. So yeah, feel free to play with them. So what I said here was mainly for people who just see this as a hobby, who want to have fun with it, or what have you, or write their own Old High German. However, for those of you who want to have accuracy to a period or to one particular dialect, then yeah, I would be highly conscious of what pronunciations you use or don't use, and this would require a lot of extensive study into the manuscript in question, where they were written, and the dialects that are spoken today in the present time. So, I mean, there are arguments for or against being very precise on pronunciation or not. Both are valid. So, in other words, it really depends on your intentions and motivations. If you want to be historically accurate to the best of your ability, then yeah, you would want to really pay attention to how you pronounce your G's or any other consonant or vowel or what have you. Moving on to F, and F has 2 pronunciations. So our first pronunciation with F, as in English F, so a f sound, or to be very phonetic about it, a labial dental f sound, so a voiceless sound. And I have a U and V there because U and V, which I'll mention later in this video, that it can represent that F sound. Our example words here are findan, to find, fater, father. So our next F sound is described as a bilabial. Armitage gives us this double F. I'm not too sure what he means by that. Perhaps just as in modern German or English, but both seem to hint towards a bilabial sound. This is not as an English F. So the F that this makes is a sort of F that makes a sound. Moving to our examples, scarf, scarf, slafan, slafan. Yeah, notice it's a sound. I'm not doing as we would in English. It's a sound. For those of you who are struggling with this, like imagine if you're a bit upset or you're frustrated with something, it's like sort of sound. Kind of like that. It's bilabial, so it's like both the top both, so it's using both lips, so hence two, right? Bilabial. I hope that helps. Let's move on. I know I said two for F, but I think it's worth including PF, this consonant combination, and its variation of PH. So the thing is with Old High German, some consonants are phonetic and others are more graphical. I'm willing to think that the PH combination is phonetically PF. However, it wouldn't surprise me that someone in the past may have hyper-literally interpreted the PH as PH, but knowing where the language went in later history, it's likely that it went the way of a PF. So to make things easier, as in today's German, PF. So a pf sound, like pfennig, penny. Next we have H, and H has two pronunciations. However, Wright and Armitage differ on this, on when each pronunciation occurs. So for Joseph Wright, H, at the start of words, in the middle of words between vowels, is an H as in English hat, so a ha sound, with our examples here of haben, to have, and sehan, to see. The second pronunciation we have for H for Joseph Wright is as in German ch, so a h sound. So as in German Buch. So for example, this would occur at the end of words and immediately before consonants. So we have hoch, meaning high, and Nacht, night. However, the distinction between Armitage and Wright here is that the H as in English hat or German house for Armitage is only at the beginning of words, but for the sound that's in every other position. So Armitage would look at these words and pronounce them as haben, to have, sehen, to see, hoch, high, and Nacht, night. Next we have asterisk J. So J does not appear in any Old High German manuscript, but instead we have I, E, and G to represent J. And this J sound is a Y sound, as in yet. For even Armitage, it's an English Y sound, which is comforting to know. So I won't mentally speculate and think of another palatal sound, but however, it to make things simple and easy, a Y as in English. Interestingly enough, Armitage says often written G before vowels, which is interesting in of itself. But let's dive right into our example words. Nerien, to save. Hirtio, genitive plural of hirti, shepherd. Jener, yawn. So Q in Old High German, chances are you're going to see it coupled with U, so it'll make a Q sound, as in the example we have here, kvedan, to say. R in Old High German is trilled, so it's a R sound, so R sound, and you trill it in all positions. So recht, right, bäran, to bear, fart, way, journey, fagar, beautiful. S in Old High German is very simple. It is the voiceless S in English, so it's a S sound in all positions, so there's no Z sound with S. It's all S, as in snake in English. So we have our examples here of sunu, sun, kyosan, to choose, course, I chose. Now we get into TH, and its variation, graphical variation of DH. So for the pronunciation within Old High German of the 9th century and the 800s, this would have made a TH sound as in English then, so a voiced dental fricative, so a th sound. So with Armitage, he says that this would be the sound of the earliest period, but before this sound, it would be a TH as in thing, so a voiceless dental fricative, a th sound. But to make things easy for you guys, if you see a DH or a TH, pronounce it as you would in English then, so a th sound. So we have our example here of denkan, to think. Now we move on to U and its graphical variation V as a consonant, which is pretty interesting in of itself. Usually when we think of U as a vowel, but in Old High German it's a consonant, and it has 3 pronunciations. Let's get into it. So on the one hand, U and its variation V represent Old High German. F would represent a f sound or a f sound, depending on the word's etymology. So I would recommend to rewind the video back to F, and just to get a refresher on how to pronounce Old High German F, because the U or V here is really just a representation for the same sound. So we have our example here of faran, meaning to go. So our other pronunciation with U, as we have here by Joseph Wright, is as in English W, so a W sound. And this is after consonants and before the vowel U. So we have our example here of schwarz, meaning black, and also wurdun, which means they became. So it's also a variation of the 2 U's, which we'll discuss in the next slide. However, by extension for Armitage, his interpretation of W, of the sound W, while we're already here, he describes it as like a W in English, but bilabial, and he compares it with the Swabian pronunciation of Schwester. I gave a standard German pronunciation there, but the way he describes it hints towards a bilabial voice approximate, or a voiced labiodental approximate. From what I'm getting from this, he's describing a sound that's like the English W, but with some V in there. So it's something between a V and a W together. So that's the understanding I'm getting. If any of you speak Swabian, let me know down below. So with Armitage's take on this sound, it would be, for examples, schwarz, black, wurden, they became. Now touching upon asteroid W, W as we know it, as we're familiar with, does not appear in any Old High German manuscript, yet grammarians, particularly Joseph Wright's primer, he uses the modern W form throughout his primer and glossary. I understand that can help with convenience. However, that's not what you would see in other grammar books written by, let's say, German authors, or the manuscripts themselves. So, on the one hand, it's convenient for scholars, but it's not at least for some scholars, but it's not really convenient in other cases. So as for its sound, Joseph Wright describes W, or quote-unquote W, or the 2 U's, a single U, or UV, or VU, or VV, as the same quality as in English W as in wit, so a simple W sound. And as for Armitage, he describes the W, if you will, in Old High German as something like an English W, but bilabial. I'm willing to assume that he's hinting towards something between a W and a V sound, so kind of like a voix sound. So that's something to bear in mind. He gives the example of a Swabian pronunciation of Schwester. Of course, what I did there was not in Swabian. Perhaps one of you can tell me with IPA pronunciation properly, but If I'm willing to guess of what Armitage means here, it's likely the latter of the IPA symbol I have there. So the sound would be roughly like an in between of like a W and a V. So for those of you who fast forwarded to this part, well, here are the examples with Wright's pronunciation. Schwarz, meaning black. Wurden, which means they became. Now touching upon Armitage's pronunciation with the examples. Schwarz, black. Wurden, they became. So X, we learned from Joseph Wright that this appears exclusively in loan words. I'm willing to think possibly from Latin, most likely. If that's the case, it's likely when you see an X, it would probably be pronounced as a X sound. And we move on to Z, which has two pronunciations. Let's get into it. Our first pronunciation for Z, as in German, so it's a TS sound, so the Ts sound, and this happens at the start of words, in the middle of words, at the end of words, and also after consonants. So we have Zahn, tooth, Herza, heart, Scats, money, Schwarz, black. Our second pronunciation, here we have a Z with a hook. It's as in German, sharp S, so it's a S sound. So we have our examples here of bisan, to bite, Hass, hatred. And finally, when consonants are doubled, you would pronounce them as you would in Italian and Swedish, according to Joseph Wright. So if you see a word like rennan, you pronounce it as that. You don't pronounce it as rinnan, as rennan. So rennan. And another example will be slafan, to sleep. And our previous word rennan means to run. And that's it for this video, guys. I hope you really liked it because I had fun making it and it's a lot of work. Thank you so much for watching. Please subscribe if you're new. And if you really like the channel, please consider becoming a patron. And if it's available, a channel member. Thank you for watching. Goodbye.